Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
What's going on? Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, Twitter, and Facebook for the Daily Racing Form pages. You can find the Daily Racing Form Facebook page as well as the Twitter handle is at DRF Inside Post. You can stream that all on here. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me right there on the bottom of the screen if you're watching along, at Bernier_Matt on Twitter. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever it may be, fire away. Today is Friday, September the 15th, 2017, and we are going to continue to roll along with what we talked about a little bit last week as far as the divisional sort of previews are concerned, and you can see at the bottom of the screen, if you're watching and you listen to this thing after it's gone live on the podcast, you have YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. Plenty of ways for you to find this show out. As we went over last week, we talked about the Breeders' Cup Classic division, and we're just going to kind of continue on through these divisions and kind of go over top fives, and things can change drastically over the next 6 or 7 weeks as we lead up to the Breeders' Cup World Championships down at Del Mar the first Saturday, or the first Friday and Saturday of November. But let's move on to the main event that will be the first day of the Breeders' Cup on Friday. It's the Breeders' Cup Distaff. It's for the fillies and mares. It's always a fun race. Last year's Breeders' Cup filly and mare Distaff, or Distaff in general, obviously fillies and mares, last year's race, arguably the main event, the best race of the weekend. I understand the Classic was a fantastic effort, fantastic race between Arrowgate and California Chrome, but the Distaff was really one for the ages because you had Songbird, you had Beholder, you had Stellar Wind, you had Forever Unbridled, you had a number of horses, and they threw it down, coming down the lane. Hopefully, if this year's Distaff is half as good as last year's, I think we're in for quite a treat on Breeders' Cup Friday. And let's just start off. We're going to go right in reverse chronological order as far as I'm concerned. This is a top five right now for the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Things, again, can change drastically, whether it's because of workouts or injuries or horses jumping up in these final rounds of preps as we get closer and closer to the Breeders' Cup. Let's start off with number five. Number five is a filly called Elate for Bill Mott. She's a 3-year-old. She started off this year very, very much one of the more hyped 3-year-olds that we had, simply because she broke her maiden so impressively last year at Aqueduct, first time out for Mott. I think an 88 buyer, something that Mott generally doesn't do, have him cranked up and ready to go first out of the box. It took her a little while to really find her stride, but it seems like Saratoga was really where everything came together. And we're going to take a look. This is Elate winning the Alabama. Larry Colmus with the call.
And Holy Helena and Mopetism in their end of the stretch, and Elate has taken the lead. It is Elate coming to the final furlong in the Alabama, putting away It Is Well. Salty runs through an opening on the inside, up into third. Lockdown is fourth, and then Actress on the outside, but Elate is clear. Elate has moved away to a 4-length lead in mid-stretch. It Is Well clings to second, and then it's Salty. Elate has won the Alabama. A strong win here by 5.5 lengths. It was close for...
The interesting thing about Elate, and I think some people are going to really kind of harp on this and hammer it home, it seems like she really appreciated every bit of that distance that she got. Now, they didn't stop the clock in any sort of record time, but at the same time, it felt like 1.25 miles was really what she wanted. Unfortunately for her, the Distaff is at 1 1/8 miles. But we've seen Bill Mott in the past do this with 3-year-olds, run them in the Distaff, and I'm not suggesting that it's kind of apples to oranges, but keep in mind, it wasn't that long ago that Close Hatches was the kind of horse that she was good early on as a 3-year-old, and maybe that's where these two fillies differ, because Elate, again, it took her a little while to kind of put everything together, but don't be surprised at all if she jumps up and runs a big race the first Friday in November. It'll be interesting to see if they decide to train her up to the Distaff or they decide to go to some sort of a prep race, whether it's at Belmont Park or elsewhere. We know that Mott's not afraid to ship around as well. He also fancies running horses down at Keeneland, so we'll see. Maybe she runs in a race like the Spinster against older horses. We'll find out. I think Elate is a talented horse, obviously. There's nobody that's going to deny that. I wonder if that 1.25 miles, though, is that the thing that she really wants? Maybe 1 1/8 miles against better horses and older horses. Maybe that's where we get a little bit dicey as far as Elate is concerned. But she's number 5 for me right now, Breeders' Cup Distaff. Number 4 is Bob Baffert. He has 2 on my list. One of them is Vale Dory, the older horse in here. She's really done nothing wrong in 2017. She started off, and we all talked about it, how it was nice to, make hay while all the big girls were away, whether it was Stellar Wind or Songbird. On the West Coast, early on in the year, Vale Dory, all she did was just run the table, and she beat up on subpar groups. And we all thought that the real test was going to come when she had to face one of the big girls. Now, she never got to face Songbird, but she did face Stellar Wind. She faced her on a couple of occasions. We're going to take a look at the Beholder Mile right now.
Finest city, it's Vale Dory on the inside and Stellar Wind stride for stride past the 3/16's pole. Vale Dory, Stellar Wind with steely determination on the outside. Vale Dory straining every sinew to keep her streak alive. Stellar Wind comes at her powerfully now. Stellar Wind with the nose in front of Vale Dory, and Stellar Wind over Vale Dory.
Another one of those efforts where she loses nothing in defeat. Michael Rona with the call. She ran her eyeballs out, and look, she stretched Stellar Wind. She made Stellar Wind, who was a champion in her own right. She made her work in that spot at Santa Anita, a racetrack that we know Stellar Wind loves. We know Vale Dory loves it as well. The interesting thing, and spoiler alert, at some point you're going to see Stellar Wind pop back up here in these final three. The interesting thing is I feel like the distance, that was the Beholder Mile. It was at 1 mile, and now you get out to 1 1/8 miles for a race like the Distaff. I don't know that additional distance is going to be Vale Dory's friend. There is a part of me, Dan Ullman and I have talked about it numerous times when we've talked about Vale Dory. I would love to see them turn her back for a race like the Filly and Mare Sprint. We know that Del Mar isn't going to be an issue for her. She's run well over that racetrack in the past. I just question 1 1/8 miles against some of the horses that really are going to appreciate the 1 1/8 miles, where I don't know that she's necessarily going to. I'd love to see them turn her back, but she's done nothing wrong, and she's deserved and earned a spot in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Number 3 is the other Baffert that we'll talk about, and she's a 3-year-old called Abel Tasman. Abel Tasman has won the Kentucky Oaks. She has done nothing wrong this year. She won the Acorn. She's won a bunch of races, and the most recent race that we saw from her was up at the spot. It was the Coaching Club American Oaks. We're also going to see a late here. Larry Colmus, they throw it down the lane.
And they're into the stretch. Abel Tasman in front off the turn. Salty went wide. She's on the far outside. A late is coming up the rail. Here comes a late. Through on the inside to challenge Abel Tasman. Salty's in the center of the track. Abel Tasman and a late come past the 16th pole. Abel Tasman, a late, giving her a run for her money as they hit the wire. Abel Tasman has won it by a head.
Some people will argue that a late was better there, and there was some funny monkey business going on down the lane with Mike Smith kind of herding in on a late. I didn't think there was that much of an issue, and I really didn't think a late was going to go by. I thought Abel Tasman had her measure that day. Now, maybe it's a scenario where a late, again, she just took a little bit of time to kind of develop and finally hit her stride. Maybe she's going to be peaking come Breeders' Cup time, whereas a horse like Abel Tasman, she's had a couple of bumps and bruises. They initially had said, we'll go to the Alabama. Well, the Alabama wasn't going to work timing-wise. We'll go to the Personal Ensign. Well, that's not going to work either. We'll find out. Maybe we see her this coming Saturday in the Cotillion down at Parks. Not this coming Saturday, next Saturday. We've got a big Saturday of racing coming up north of the border of Woodbine here before. One thing before the other, but maybe we possibly see a horse like Abel Tasman come back in the Cotillion. But that kind of is the great unknown now. With the 3-year-old that's had as much racing as Abel Tasman has had, is she going to be ready to go against the older horses? And it sounds like if she does get to the Distaff, it'll be the first time she'll face older horses. So, and there are no ham and eggers. It's a really good group. It'll be interesting to see what we get out of Abel Tasman. She's done nothing wrong. I have a hard time believing she won't be champion 3-year-old filly at this point, just based on her credentials. She's done nothing wrong. And again, I think she's number 3 on this list. And I suppose I could switch around 5 through 3 at any point. And maybe as I get farther along, I'll start to fall for one of those horses. But it seems like to me the top 2 have solidified themselves as the 2 horses to beat come Breeders' Cup Distaff time. We're going to talk about number 2 right now. That is Forever Unbridled for Dallas Stewart. She's only raced twice this year. But it seems like she really appreciates having some time between her races, very similar to another horse we'll talk about in a minute. But Forever Unbridled, she came back in the fleur-de-lis down at Churchill Downs. She was just much better than that field. She never got out of first gear. She had to run a little bit more in the Personal Ensign because there was a loose on the lead horse called Songbird. And again, Larry Colmus up at the spa. Here we go.
Mike Smith and Songbird turn for home in front. Forever Unbridled is coming down the center of the racetrack. On the inside, asking for money, running a big one too. Songbird with a 60th to go. Forever Unbridled runs at her. Songbird inside. Forever Unbridled on the outside. A dramatic finish. Forever Unbridled has defeated Songbird.
Gutsy effort from Forever Unbridled. Gutsy effort from Songbird. Songbird, unfortunately, is retired, and we won't see her in the Distaff. Forever Unbridled is an interesting case because we know that the 1 1/8 miles is going to be right in her wheelhouse. She probably even wants a little bit more, if we're being honest. I think if she gets the pace set up that she needs, I think she's an interesting one. Del Mar is always going to be the unknown for these horses because we saw so many of them over the summer meeting not necessarily appreciate the ground. The problem is it's very difficult to throw that in and just say, oh, well, you know what, a horse that's never run over it, I'm going to handicap and think that maybe she's not going to like it. That's very difficult, and you start doing that, you're going to throw a complete monkey wrench into all of your handicapping. So I'm not going to go that far, but it is an unknown for these horses that have yet to run over the surface, as opposed to the other horses that we have seen run over the surface and we've seen run well over the surface. Forever Unbridled, it'll be her first time over the Del Mar Strip. She's number 2 for me as far as the distaff is concerned. Number 1 is a horse that has had success down at Del Mar. She's had success on the biggest stages, under the brightest lights. The number 1 is Stellar Wind. Stellar Wind has done nothing wrong thus far. All she does is go out and win, and I know she's run against Vale Dory a couple of times, but you go back to see what she did as a 4-year-old, you go back to see what she did as a 3-year-old, she has done nothing wrong. She is very close to being a Breeders' Cup Distaff champion already. She almost won the race at Keeneland as a 3-year-old, and then last year, if she hadn't broke as poorly as she did in the Distaff, I think she would have been right there at the wire along with Songbird and Beholder. But her most recent start, I think she's solidified that she's just a little bit better, particularly at distances, than Vale Dory. This is the Clement L. Hirsch that Stellar Wind was victorious in.
But there's a wall of horses coming to tackle. Big League just a leader. Night's Watch now up between horses in the shadow roll on the outside. Tabasco Road. Tabasco Road now coming fast down the center.
That's not it. So, sorry about that, but you can go in, whether it's Formulator or on YouTube, the Clement L. Hirsch. It was an effort where she's just better, I think, than Vale Dory is Stellar Wind at the distance. That's the big key. Distance, I think, is the thing that's going to separate those horses. Maybe quality, maybe they're on par with one another, but I really think that the 2 turns, mile and an 1/8, that's right in Stellar Wind's wheelhouse, as opposed to Vale Dory, where maybe the distance is going to be kind of her bugaboo. So let's take a look at that top 5 one more time, if we could, guys. 5 through 1 in reverse chronological order. Elate number 5. Number 4 is Vale Dory. Number 3, Abel Tasman. Number 2, Forever Unbridled. And number 1, Stellar Wind for me as far as the Breeders' Cup Distaff is concerned. Again, this is on September the 15th, so a lot of things can happen between now and the first Friday in November, but it'll be interesting to see. At the very least, if all 5 of them get there, it should be a good edition of the Breeders' Cup Distaff. We're going to take a break here. When we come back, we'll do a quick review of what happened last weekend. Nothing really good as far as handicapping is concerned, unfortunately. And then we'll get you ready for what's coming up this week. And a bunch of good racing down at Churchill Downs, good racing at Woodbine, good racing at Belmont Park, all over the country. Stay with us, The Matt Bernier Show.
California Chrome, straight and strong. Absolutely sensational. California Chrome. California Chrome. To California Chrome. Away to the Kentucky Derby. California Chrome wins impressively.
He's gone into overdrive. California Chrome wins the Dubai World Cup.
One of the greatest performances you'll ever see.
Chrome turns to gold.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Well, the amazing thing about our work was just how similar he is to Uncle Mo. I mean, right away, of all of Rapoli's babies, he stood out as the most advanced, the most precocious, and the most talented, and that was exactly the same thing we'd seen a few years before with Uncle Mo.
Outwork wins it for John Velasquez.
To be able to win a Grade 1 like the Wood Memorial in only his 4th lifetime start was very impressive.
It is Outwork in front.
$12:14 in the East, $9:14 in the West. The Matt Bernier Show, DRF TV, live.drf.com. Let's do a very, very quick recap as far as what happened last weekend, and the reason that we'll move through it quickly is because we only have a couple of replays, but also because I wasn't very good just call a spade. Sometimes we're good, sometimes bad. This was a particularly poor weekend for me all around. We'll get into the football later on. Let's start with the Arlington-Washington Futurity. We don't have any tape of this, but I thought a live long shot, and my pick, my best bet on out of the gate was the X, and it looked like on the far turn he was going to make a little bit of a mild move, and then he was flatter than flat. He didn't pick his feet up at any point. He ends up running last. He took a lot of money early on, too. He opened up as the favorite, so it kind of felt like, he was a good thing going into it, and he just did not pick his feet up for a second. And, of course, the horse that wins is my son, Barry Lee. He comes from off the pace. He shows a new dimension. It's worth noting, though, with Barry Lee, keep in the back of your mind, I think Violence is going to be interesting. I mean, we don't have many synthetic races left other than Woodbine or Arlington or Presque Isle or Golden Gate, but Violence won the Cash Call Futurity as a 2-year-old on synthetic. And the dam of Barry Lee was something like 8 for 18 on synthetic racetracks. So he's bred for that kind of thing. That's not a surprise that he was able to take to that. I'm going to be fascinated to see what they decide to do with him going forward. Do you try to stretch him out? Do you put him back on dirt? You've got a number of opportunities and situations for this horse for Horatio De Paz. I think he's still very, very talented. I think he's more talented than Recruiting Ready, and we saw what Recruiting Ready was capable of doing as a 3-year-old this year sprinting. So we'll find out. Barry Lee gets the job done in the Arlington-Washington Futurity. My live long shot, my pick, the X, last. We move on to the Kentucky Downs Ladies Turf. I thought a vulnerable favorite coming into this spot was Miss Temple City, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that maybe she didn't have the campaign that the Connections had hoped for. Things, it starts and stops. Weather did not cooperate with her, and she just didn't look very good in her most recent start. That was down at Monmouth Park, but she comes back here as a 4-5 favorite, and she prevails. John Lees with the call.
Back to Seeking Paradise, and Bowley tries to stoke it up from the inside. At the top of the stretch now, Zipessa picks up the pace, and she goes on for home. But here's an immediate attack by Miss Temple City. Linda's got the inside, then Susie B. and Bowley. In deep stretch, Zipessa now fully extended to hold off Miss Temple City. And the whip coming out here from Edgar Prado, just a tap there on Miss Temple City. And she comes to the front, and the decorated Grade 1 winner's got the lead from Zipessa. Zipessa stretching her, but Miss Temple City, her class prevails, and she wins the Kentucky.
Good to see Miss Temple City get back on the beam and get back on the winning track. I know she got the job done as a 4-5 favorite, and I know Zipessa ran really well. There's still a part of me that wonders if I think she's lost a little bit from what we had seen last year and the year prior. She's still very, very talented, don't get me wrong, but if you do go to a race like the Breeders' Cup Mile, or you go to a race like one of the two down at Keeneland, whether it's again against the boys or she takes on the girls and the First Lady, there's just a part of me that wonders, is she going to be a little bit more reputation than anything? We'd have to wait and see what those fields look like when that time comes. But she gets the job done. She wins, and I lose with her as a vulnerable favorite. We move on to the Kentucky Downs Turf Cup, or the Kentucky Turf Cup, I should say. This is, I thought a live long shot in this spot was Bullard's Alley. He had run well enough in this race last year. He was forwardly placed. I thought he'd be forwardly placed in this spot. Unfortunately for me, he was not. John Lees again with the call.
And they're gearing up now, coming for the top of the stretch. And St. Louis, long shot, now finds the front. St. Louis comes to confront One Go, All Go. Postulation switches out. And here comes Postulation. And Oscar Nominated now kicks it in. And he's coming with a big bid. And also Muqtaser. Now in deep stretch. Muqtaser, Oscar Nominated, Postulation between them. And they're giving it their all as they lay it down here with a 16 to go. Oscar Nominated, Postulation, and Muqtaser. It's Oscar Nominated to win by a stubborn neck.
Oscar Nominated gets the job done for Mike Maker. Mike Maker is one of the best trainers in the country, and he might be the best turf trainer not named Chad Brown. And I think you could even argue that things that he is capable of doing with sort of mid-level claimers and stretching them out and giving them new life, I think is just unbelievable. Maker deserves all the credit in the world. And Oscar Nominated, he's a nice horse. We had talked about it in the stakes preview. He is never going to blow you away with a performance. He's honest. He's going to show up and run. He's probably going to give you a 97 or a 98 buyer. Against the best of the best, it's probably not going to be good enough to win, but you can find spots for him, and Maker placed him beautifully here. They win the Kentucky Turf Cup down at Kentucky Downs. Bullard's Alley, that was kind of the MO for me this past weekend. I thought he was a live long shot. I bet him. I picked him. He finishes 6th. I thought he'd be forwardly placed. He was coming from the back of the pack. I don't know. Sometimes it happens. But basically, if you wanted to describe my performance last weekend, you could just put up a picture of a dumpster and it on fire, because that was me, a dumpster fire. Guess what? The football wasn't much better, but before we get to that, we're going to go over a few races after break. Coming up tomorrow, we've got races at Churchill Downs, we've got races up at Woodbine, all over the place, and then we'll talk about the Week 2 trifecta for the NFL. Stay with us on the Matt Bernier Show.
California Chrome, straight and strong. Absolutely sensational. California Chrome.
California
To
Chrome.
California Chrome. Away to the Kentucky Derby. California Chrome wins impressively.
He's gone into overdrive. California Chrome wins the Dubai World Cup.
One of the greatest performances you'll ever see.
Chrome turns to gold.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticketmaker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticketmaker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticketmaker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticketmaker, the exotic wagering app.
Well, the amazing thing about our work was just how similar he is to Uncle Mo. I mean, right away, of all of Rapoli's babies, he stood out as the most advanced, the most precocious, and the most talented, and that was exactly the same thing we'd seen a few years before with Uncle Mo.
Outwork wins it for John Velasquez.
To be able to win a Grade 1 like the Wood Memorial in only his 4th lifetime start was very impressive.
It is Outwork in front.
12:21 on the east, 9:21 on the west. The Matt Bernier Show, DRF TV, live.drf.com, and the social media for the Daily Racing Form, whether it's the DRF Facebook page or at DRF Inside Post on Twitter. We're going to have to rip through this because we've got a lot to go in a short amount of time because it is 12:22. Let's dive into the two-year-old races down at Churchill Downs tomorrow afternoon. It's opening weekend down underneath the Twin Spires. Let's start off with race 10. It's the Iroquois for the boys. 2 turns. Let's take a look at that field if we could. You've got a field of 10 that are going to go postward. My odds on the far right side in post position order. The 1 is 10 City, 9-1. Hollywood Star, 6-1. Pont du Gard, 10-1. Trace Eckes, 6-1. Eben, 24-1. Smart Remark, 32-1. Flame Away, 6-1. Big Jemmy, 10-1 as we turn over 9 through 10. The Tabulator, 10-1, as well as Mo Diddley, 6-1. As you can tell, I don't have a strong opinion in this race. I think it is wide open. I think you should shop around for prices if you can. The horse that should appreciate the distance the most is Hollywood Star. He's bred for it top and bottom, and he gives off the impression that 2 turns is kind of what he wants all along. My concern is he just seems like a bit of a grinder, a bit of a stayer. I don't think he's going to blow you away with any sort of big change. I think a vulnerable favorite is 10 City if he does indeed go off favored, simply because when I first looked at him, I didn't think he was really a 2-turn kind of horse. I think he's very, very talented. I think he's very, very fast. I wonder if he's one of the precocious 2-year-olds. My live long shot and my pick in this race would be Trace Eckes from Mike Maker. I think he is an interesting runner simply because he's very, very green. You go back and watch the tape of that Indiana Grand Race most recently. You can do that in Formulator. He's swapping leads all over the place, but he's finishing very, very nicely, and he came to hand pretty well on the backside. So I think he's an interesting one to keep an eye on. I made him 6-1. I think you're going to get 6-1, but I have to be honest, I'm not. The problem is if he's very goofy again, I don't know that he can get away with that against better horses. We'll find out. For me, the Iroquois is much more of a sit back and watch and see if we can take some notes. Maybe we see a decent horse that can run in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile in a few weeks. The Pocahontas, I have a more, let's say, strong opinion. Let's take a look at that field if we could. You've got a field of 12 2-year-old fillies in post position order. The number 1 is Lady Freedom, 32-1. First Mate, 49-1. Snowfire, 19-1. Harbor Lights, 6-1. Primo Extremo, 32-1. Vision of Justice, 32-1. Take Charge Paula, 16-1. Sunny Skies, 10-1 as we turn over 9 through 12. Sultry, 4-1. Upset Brewing, 6-1. Patrona Margarita, 24-1. And Kelly's Humor, 5-1. I think the most likely winner of this race is a filly that just broke her maiden. Her name is Sultry. We're going to take a look at her replay right now. This was down at Ellis Park most recently. And you're going to see she's coming up on the outside. She's got the big white blaze on her face. She's got those red sleeves, red hat, white body. She just changed leads, and she's going to level off. And I just love the way that she finishes. She's still in second right now. She's going to eventually take things over, and you just look at the way that she's stretching and striding out. I just love everything about that action. I think distance, she's another one. She is bred for it top and bottom. I think she is the most likely winner in the race. She is my pick. I made her 4-1. I believe she's 10 on the line. I think she comes down from there just a little bit, though. I like Sultry to win the Pocahontas. Let's move on to the big one up north of the border. It's the Woodbine Mile, a great day of racing from our friends up in Toronto. I think you've got a lot of things that you can do that day, whether you've got the $200,000 guaranteed pick 5 on track at Woodbine, whether you've got the pick 5 that's going to be combining Woodbine and Belmont Park. I think it's a fantastic deal from both jurisdictions, both tracks, both people. I think it's really, really good stuff. 14% takeout, I believe, on that 20-cent pick 5 between Belmont and Woodbine. But let's dive into their main event. It's the Woodbine Mile, race number 12. We'll take a look at this field in post position order. The number 1 is World Approval. He just won the 4-star Dave down at Saratoga. I made him 4-1. Tower of Texas, one of the local hopes, made him 5-1. Long on Value, 16-1. Best Bard, 99-1. Dragon Bay, 49-1. Deauville, 9-1. Conquest Panthera, 12-1. Mondialiste, the winner of the Woodbine Mile 2 years ago, 6-1. So we move over 9 through 12. A-Rod, 24-1. Lancaster Bomber, the lone 3-year-old in this race, coming in for Aidan O'Brien, 13-1. Dutch Connection, 19-1. And Glenville Gardens, 16-1. I think the most likely winner of this race is the number 1 horse, World Approval. We're going to take a look right now at his victory over a very, very boggy turf course up at Saratoga. This was in the 4-star Dave. I think this was a combination of him really liking the cut in the ground and some of his main competitors disliking it, whether it's Time Test or whether it's a horse like Disco Partner. I don't think they got over the ground nearly as well as World Approval did. The good thing about World Approval is he's not reliant on soft ground. He acts just as well on firm as he does on soft. I think he is the most likely winner in the race. I don't think you're anywhere near the 4-1 that I've pegged him at, though. I think he's going to be a bit of an underlay. I would imagine he goes off in the 2-1 range as our main domestic hope. The live long shot for me and the pick in the race is one of the local hopes. And that's Tower of Texas. We're going to take a look at the Play the King. This is his most recent start. He's in the red cap with the green sleeves in the back right now. Stuck behind horses. He's got nowhere to go. You're going to see Glenville Gardens in the blue hat. He's going to follow him, and I think he's just a better horse, Tower of Texas, than Glenville Gardens is. I do think Glenville Gardens is a sneaky one to use underneath, though, in this race. And you're going to see that Tower of Texas kicks on at the end. This race, a couple of things. Slow pace early on, despite what the fractions may suggest. 7 furlongs. Now he stretches back out to a mile. And with a cleaner trip, I think he's closer at the end. I don't know that he quite gets there, but I didn't need him to win that race. I want him to win this race. I think Tower of Texas is going to win the Woodbine Mile. I think for the local team up there, Roger Atfield, I think Tower of Texas is a sneaky one in here, and what should be a good number. I made him 5-1. He's 12 on the line. I think he goes off in the 8 or 9-1 range. And guess what? That might be the bet of the weekend for me, Tower of Texas, whether he wins or loses, but I could also use him all over the place because I do think he's going to come with his run no matter what. Let's dive into the NFL Week 2 trifecta. Week 1, woof, 0-3. And you know what? Craig was right. Producer Craig in the back. Don't trust the New York Jets when you need money. And the line was 8.5. Obviously, they lost by 9. The other games were just a complete disaster as well. The Giants just forgot that there was a game. They didn't show up down in Jerry World. And then, unfortunately for me, the New Orleans Saints, the offense was just a little lackluster on Monday night against the Vikings. So 0-3 year to date. As long as we don't go 0-3 this weekend, we'll be okay. And I really can't go 1-2, but if we can get back on the beam, just put us back on the right side. Let's go 66% here this weekend. Let's start off with the Tennessee Titans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the big thing here to keep in mind, the Jags are catching 1.5 at home. I'm a sucker for home teams catching points. The Titans, they played well enough, I guess, against the Raiders opening week. The Jags, they beat up on the Texans, who ultimately came back to win last night in arguably the worst football game I've ever seen. It was really gross, really, really gross. Anyone that watched it knows exactly what I'm talking about. I don't think there's such a discrepancy between the Titans and the Jaguars. The only thing is, Allen Robinson, done for the season with the ACL for the Jags. To me, that's almost a good thing because now you just have to, you're forced to pound it on the ground with Leonard Fournette. And I think Fournette is the goods. Hopefully his foot holds up long term. Blake Bortles, we don't need to dive into the whole Blake Bortles thing. Anybody that has seen Blake Bortles play knows why we don't need to dive into that. And the Titans, I think, are good. Mariota is better than I thought he was going to be in the NFL. I think that team is all right. You get DeMarco Murray. I don't know. I mean, I think they're okay. I don't think they're superstars or anything spectacular. Give me the Jags catching the points, 1.5 at home against the Titans. We move on to the second game, the Washington Redskins +3 on the road at the Rams. The Rams, who would have thought that the Rams would score the most points in the NFL week 1? Because I don't care if you tell me that, I'm going to think you're lying. Because there's no way that you possibly could have said that the Rams are going to just completely blow the doors off of the Colts. Now, the Colts are inept, but we'll dive into that. That's another story for another time. I think the Redskins, I think they played a little bit, trying to think the right way. I don't want to say they played better than it looks, but I don't think the final margin is indicative of the way that game unfolded with the Eagles. Now, look, Kirk Cousins needs to be better, obviously, but he didn't get a lot of help. He didn't get much help at all. I think they are better than maybe what that final score would indicate against the Eagles in the first week of the season. And the Eagles are a decent enough team. Carson Wentz seems to be getting back on the right side of things. Give me the Redskins +3 on the road at the Rams. The Rams, I don't think, are nearly as good as what they showed week 1, but they're also probably not nearly as bad as they were last year. I think the whole new regime in there is much better, obviously, than what Jeff Fisher was. And I'm a little concerned about Todd Gurley. Gurley is still only averaging something stupid like 2.5 yards a carry. That's going to have to improve greatly here as we go forward. The Green Bay Packers and the Atlanta Falcons. I believe this is the Sunday night game. The Packers are catching 3 on the road. I thought Green Bay played very well Sunday afternoon against the Seattle Seahawks. And the problem with the Seahawks is their offensive line. I think I could get through the offensive line. That's not a good thing. The Falcons are going to be a much tougher test, I think, for the Packers. But at the same time, I don't think the Falcons, I thought they were going to take a step backward from last year. I still think they're going to be very, very good. But I don't know that they're Super Bowl caliber. I still maintain that. I think they're going to take a small step backward. I mean, they had the Bears play them really, really well last week. And the Bears, to the point where they were in the red zone late in the fourth quarter and they had an opportunity to tie the game, if not win it outright. I think the Falcons are good. Now, keep in mind, this is going to be their home opener at their brand new stadium, Mercedes-Benz, whatever it is. So they're going to have all the juices flowing. They're going to be feeling good. But I think the Packers are still legitimate. And anytime you have Aaron Rodgers on your team, you have a big chance. So a quick recap. For week 2, year-to-date, NFL trifecta, year-to-date 0-3. Hopefully we get back on the beam. The Titans at the Jags. Give me the Jags +1.5 at home. The Redskins at the Rams. Give me the Redskins +3 on the road. And the Packers at the Falcons. Give me the Pack +3 on the road. It is 12:32. We're a little bit heavy on time here on the Matt Bernier Show this week. If you watched on live.drf.com or livestream.com, thank you for doing so. If you watched on the social media pages, whether it's the Daily Racing Form Facebook page or the Daily Racing Form's Twitter handle @DRF Inside Post, thank you for doing so. If you check it out podcast, as you always do, or whatever it is, if you heard something you need to listen to it again, you have YouTube, you have SoundCloud, you have iTunes, you have video.drf.com. As we do every week, this show leads right in to the latest edition of Out of the Gate, and it's with all the usual suspects we're all going through. And you get a special appearance from Marcus Hirsch talking about some of the Europeans coming over here for the races up at Woodbine. Best of luck as always. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter @Bernier_Matt. Good luck, whatever you're playing, wherever you're playing this week, and we will talk again next Friday. Without further ado, Out of the Gate.